The lights of Nashville in 1972 fell like a pale golden ribbon across the stage. The crowd stirred, waiting for a new voice to emerge. But no one was prepared for the shock about to unfold. A girl, just 13 years old, stepped into the light. Her long hair draped gently, her eyes bright, sparkling, touched with shyness. And then the voice came, husky, thick, weathered, a sound so raw it froze the entire hall. The opening line of Delta Dawn cut through the silence like a blade, carrying sorrow and longing that seemed possible only from a woman who had lived through decades of heartbreak. In just a few minutes, the name Tanya Tucker spread across Nashville and then across America. Headlines screamed, "The teenage phenomenon of country music." But beneath the thunder of applause, a quiet question lingered. Was that light too blinding for such a small girl to bear? History would answer. Behind the voice that captured millions lay a life of upheaval. Tanya Tucker would be swept into a storm no child star escapes. Dazzling spotlight intertwined with scandal's shadow. Passionate love affairs crumbling into heartbreak. Loneliness waiting in cold hotel rooms. And yet, like a flame that refused to die, she rose, burned brighter, and climbed to heights no one imagined. A Grammy in 2019, and finally on October 22nd, 2023, her name enshrined in the Country Music Hall of Fame. This is not just the story of a singer. It is a tragedy and a hymn. The tale of a warrior woman who dared to sing through wounds and pride, turning a rebellious, turbulent life into the immortal legacy of country music. And that journey began with a little Texas girl who dared to raise her voice on a summer night in 1972. Early life. It was 1958 in the small town of Seminole, Texas, where endless cotton fields burned white under the scorching sun. A baby girl was born. Her name, Tanya Denise Tucker. She was the youngest of a poor working family. Her father, Jesse Bo Tucker, operated heavy machinery. Her mother, Juanita, was tireless, resilient, a woman who carried the weight of the home. Life was never stable. Bo's work forced the family to keep moving, from Texas to Arizona to Utah, and then Nevada. For Tanya, childhood became a wandering road. But along that road, a seed was planted, the dream of standing on stage and pouring her voice into the crowd. Her memories of childhood are bound to Wilcox, Arizona. There, the whole town had only one radio station, KHIL, playing old country songs on repeat. Inside their small home, the voices of Ernest Tubb, Mel Tillis, Loretta Lynn filled the air, like beams of light piercing through hardship. At every fair, every concert they attended, Tanya would sit still, eyes wide open, devouring every lyric, as if she were engraving a sacred vow into her heart. By 1966, just 8 years old, Tanya looked at her father and said, "I will be a country singer." Not the fleeting dream of a child, but a declaration so fierce that Bo sat silent, shaken. He realized then his little girl carried something rare, an unshakable fire that no one else in the family possessed. The first true chance came in 1969 when the family moved to Henderson, Nevada. At only 11, Tanya began appearing on small local stages. Audiences saw a tiny girl. But when she opened her mouth, the sound was husky, heavy, and heartbreakingly real. Parents who once thought it a child's fantasy now saw the truth. Their daughter was destined for something greater. Soon after, Tanya recorded her first demo tape. It passed through the hands of songwriter Dolores Fuller and then landed with legendary producer Billy Sherrill, head of Columbia Records. When Sherrill listened, he froze. Inside that voice, he heard something impossible. A soul both fragile and fierce, weathered yet young. He signed the teenage girl immediately, convinced he held a rare gem capable of shaking Nashville. But before stardom, Tanya walked through small trials. She auditioned for the film Jeremiah Johnson in Utah, then was invited by Judy Lynn to sing at the Arizona State Fair. Each of those moments were bricks laid quietly on the road ahead. No one could have imagined that just 3 years later, in 1972, Tanya Tucker would bring America to its knees. With Delta Dawn, early career, the dream of becoming a singer did not fall on Tanya Tucker like magic. Before the lights of Nashville called her name, the little girl from Texas had to endure years of trial and hardship. While other children played carefree games, Tanya traveled endlessly with her family from Utah to Nevada, searching for survival. Her parents, weary but determined, carried the burden of work, yet still nurtured the fragile dream of their daughter's voice. Tanya did whatever she could to help: cleaning, babysitting, even manual labor at local fairs, where sometimes, if she was lucky, they let her hold the microphone and sing a few songs. They weren't grand stages, just makeshift platforms, dust swirling in the air, mixed with the scent of fried food. But for Tanya, they were everything. Each time she stepped into that dim light, her hunger for the big stage grew stronger. A hunger to one day hear her name echo across America's grandest halls. By 1969, when the family moved to Henderson, Nevada, Tanya began performing more regularly. In smoky casino lounges and tiny nightclubs, people heard a voice that did not belong to a child. It was husky, wounded, and aching with longing. Word spread quickly. Soon, Tanya was invited to record a demo. But the path was never lined with roses. Record labels dismissed her, insisting a child could never carry the weight of songs soaked in adult sorrow. Her early recordings were rejected. Doors that seemed to open slammed shut in her face, and every time, Tanya would grip her father's hand tightly, silently vowing she would not give up. Then, the door that changed everything. One demo found its way to songwriter Dolores Fuller. From her hands, it reached legendary producer Billy Sherrill, head of Columbia Records. When Sherrill pressed play, he nearly stopped breathing. He had heard thousands of voices, but never a child who carried in her tone the soul of someone scarred by life's losses. He signed her immediately, and with that contract, the gates of Nashville swung open. In May 1972, inside Columbia's studio, Tanya Tucker clutched the microphone, her heart pounding. She took a breath and sang the first line of Delta Dawn. No one in that room could have imagined that within weeks, the song would sweep across America, transforming a 13-year-old girl into a national phenomenon. And with that, Tanya Tucker's half-century journey had begun. Career success. In 1972, just weeks after Delta Dawn was released, America was on fire. Radio stations played it on repeat. Posters of a 13-year-old girl flooded the streets. The press called Tanya Tucker a phenomenon, a teenager singing with the voice of someone who had lived a lifetime of sorrow. It wasn't just a hit. It was the birth of an icon. But Tanya was no one-hit wonder. Over the next 3 years, she proved it. What's Your Mama's Name? In 1973. Then Blood Red and Going Down and Would You Lay With Me in a Field of Stone. Each song climbed the charts. Each one carried a piece of her soul, sending chills through the audience. Nashville was stunned. How could a girl barely in her teens sing of pain and love with such brutal honesty? Yet with every burst of fame came the crushing shadow of pressure. The brighter her star burned, the harder she had to fight to prove she was more than a child singing adult songs. First Columbia Records, then MCA, pushed her relentlessly into the cycle, recording, touring, interviews. For a teenage girl, it was a dream and a nightmare all at once. Some nights she laughed on stage, only to collapse in a hotel room later, sobbing into her pillow, drowning in loneliness. The peak came in the mid-1970s. With MCA, Tanya released Lizzie and the Rain Man in 1975, a hit that not only crowned her a country star, but broke into the pop charts. It soared into the Billboard Hot 100 Top 40, a rare feat for a country singer of that era. From southern bars to national radio, from small-town Texas to the neon lights of Las Vegas, her name was everywhere: Tanya Tucker. Then in 1978, Nashville trembled again. Tanya released TNT, rebranding herself with a bold, rock-infused, sensual image. The album cover, Tanya in blazing red leather, eyes burning with defiance, shocked the public and mesmerized them. More importantly, the album struck gold, proving Tanya was not just rebellious, but powerful enough to turn rebellion into art. By her early 20s, Tanya Tucker stood as one of America's most formidable country stars. Her voice was unlike anyone else's, not as silky as Dolly Parton, not as rough-hewn as Loretta Lynn. It was husky, fierce, primal, a sound that cut straight to the heart. That raw style made Tanya a pioneer, paving the way for strong, rebellious women in country music, an influence still felt by artists like Miranda Lambert and Casey Musgraves, who cite Tanya as a boundless inspiration. But behind the dazzling glare of fame, Tanya was sinking deeper into the whirlpool of pressure. On stage, she was the untouchable queen. Off stage, she was still a young woman, fragile, unsteady, carrying the unbearable weight of a nation's expectations. That was the price of stardom. Where the brightest light shines, the darkest shadow waits. Personal life. When the stage lights bathed Tanya Tucker, the world saw only a dazzling star. But behind the glow, her private life was a storm of passion, heartbreak, and wounds that would never fully heal. In the early 1980s, Tanya entered the most tumultuous love affair of her life. With Glenn Campbell, the country legend 22 years her senior. They met when both were at the height of their careers, yet both were hollowed by loneliness and fear. The love was explosive, fiery, intoxicating, unstoppable, and yet destructive. The press followed their every step, every hand held, every argument. On stage, they sang and smiled together. Behind the curtain, they clashed in storms of rage. Years later, Tanya confessed, it was a love both sweet and devastating. We loved each other until we were exhausted. But Tanya's life was not defined only by fiery romance. Amid the wreckage, she discovered her greatest solace: motherhood. 3 children, Presley Tanita, 1989, Bo Grayson, 1991, and Layla LaCosta, 1999, became her anchor when her career faltered. She often said that walking into her home and seeing her children's smiles gave her the only true place she belonged. Music brought her money and fame, but family gave her the reason to live. Friends, too, became lifelines. Through chaos, when alcohol and scandal threatened to consume her, it was those closest to Tanya who pulled her back from the edge. Most of all, her mother, Juanita, who had stood by her since the very first day, a constant reminder of her true worth. And faith was never absent. Though she bore the label "bad girl of country," Tanya carried a quiet gratitude toward God. She believed every triumph and every failure was written as part of a larger plan. That faith kept her from collapsing completely, even in her darkest years. Love, family, friendship, faith. Together they painted Tanya's life in bold and fragile colors, flames of passion, depths of sorrow, and glimmers of hope. And it was those very elements that shaped Tanya Tucker into what she became, both vulnerable and unbreakable. A woman unafraid to reveal the truth, that behind the spotlight, she was simply a human being, searching for happiness like anyone else. Controversy and tragedy. After TNT, 1978, red posters of Tanya Tucker glowed across Nashville. Beneath them stood a girl, too young to carry the weight of rebellion, yet too proud to step back. Every night, after the roar of applause faded behind velvet curtains, only the scent of whiskey and glitter clung to her collar. The hotel room felt like an empty stage, where the only line spoken was a weary sigh. In the early 1980s, her love with Glenn Campbell burned like a guitar strung too tight. They clung to each other on stage, but off stage, silence shattered into words that could never be taken back. Some nights they embraced in the wings, stepping out to sing as if the world held only the two of them. But when the lights went dark, two silhouettes turned and walked in opposite directions. By 1982, the affair ended, splashed across tabloids, every detail for sale. But inside Tanya's chest was a hollow no camera could capture. Between 1980 and 1983, the radio slowed on the name Tanya Tucker. Singles rose halfway up the charts, then fell. The girl who had stunned America in 1972 suddenly found herself voiceless, not on record, but in life. One night, in a dim lounge out west, Tanya stared at her reflection. Eyes swollen under powder, hair combed back, fingers fastening buttons as if reassembling herself. A bottle of whiskey rested by the sink. The yellow light shimmered across the water, offering only a counterfeit comfort. Then came 1988, a family kitchen. Her mother placed a hand on the table. Her father locked eyes with his daughter. No shouting, just a sentence, soft but heavy as stone. "You have to go." The doors of Betty Ford opened with the sting of disinfectant and hallways bright as knives. On the first day, Tanya faced the mirror barefaced and knew if she was ever to sing again, every note would now be paid for with sobriety. In her third therapy session, recounting a lonely hotel night, her voice cracked on one word: alone. A word she had sung all her life, but never truly admitted to herself. Balance seemed possible, until time twisted the knife again. In 2006, her father, Bo Tucker, passed away. In the backyard, his old pickup still carried the scent of oil from nights he drove her to county fairs. Tanya placed her hand on the worn steering wheel, whispering, "We made it, Daddy." No voice answered. In 2012, her mother, Juanita, followed. The woman who once sat in the front row of every show, now gone, as quiet as a prayer. Between those two tombstones were nights Tanya opened her closet, searching for a familiar scent, only to close the door and lean against the wood until dawn. Her love life? Broken engagements, abandoned dinners, journeys that began with two but ended with one. Not pride, just a heart slower to heal than her tour schedule. Once, before a show, her youngest daughter Layla texted, "Mom, sing safe." Two simple words. Sewing shut the torn edges of her mother's soul. Presley, Bo Grayson, Layla. Three names, three anchors that kept Tanya from slipping back into old temptations. Money was never a kind story in a wandering artist's life. In years without hits, bills arrived steady as the postman's knock. Tanya learned to say no to what she once thought was salvation, and yes to small shows in towns no one remembered. There, she met farm couples with dust still on their hands. A man clutching a photo of his late wife, asking her to sign 2 sparrows in a hurricane. She sang for them and realized she was singing to save herself. And then, her body rebelled. After a long tour, her throat dry as desert, her breath ragged in a dressing room no larger than a closet. A nurse pressed a nebulizer mask to her face, counting down from 10. At 9, Tanya pulled it off. "I have to get back on stage." Pain had long since become her encore. The news of Glenn Campbell's death, 2017, reached her in a quiet kitchen, radio by the salt and pepper shakers. The bulletin passed like a gust of wind. She turned the volume down, letting silence fill the space between 2 breaths. They had loved, they had broken, and each carried a shard of the song forward. Sometimes, life is only that. In a small town hall in 2018, a plastic cup of iced tea trembled in her hand as the announcer called, "Miss Tanya Tucker." The room was not large, but the applause was thick as memory. She stepped out, hand on the microphone, and in the front row saw a woman in a white hat, smiling, just like her mother once did. The song began, in a lower key, half a beat slower. It didn't matter. Some stories can only be told once you've crossed to the far shore of them. Those years did not kill Tanya Tucker, but they changed her voice, from glittering to deep amber, from carefree to grateful. People still whisper of bold album covers, 1978, of an older lover, 1980 to 82, of Rehab, 1988, of Funerals, 2006, 2006, 2012. But in the crowd, the audience wants only one thing: that when the first note rises, they can believe the singer knows what it means to lose, to endure, and to return. And on one such night, when the final line ended, Tanya didn't raise her hand for more applause. She laid the microphone down like setting down a burden carried too long. She smiled and walked off stage. Behind the curtain, her breathing slowed. No victory speech, no declaration, just the steady heartbeat of a woman who had drowned many times, yet always found her way back to the surface. A heartbeat loud enough to turn silence into music. Legacy and influence. When Tanya Tucker emerged from the shadows, what remained was not just a long career, but a scar carved into the very heart of country music. That voice, husky, fierce, unvarnished, changed how Nashville looked at women. Before Tanya, the image of a female country singer was tied to sweetness, to purity, to tender ballads. After Tanya, the world knew that women could also rebel. They could sing rough, they could sing through wounds, and they could wear their pride without apology. Songs like What's Your Mama's Name, 1973, Lizzie and the Rain Man, 1975, Strong Enough to Bend, 1988, and 2 Sparrows in a Hurricane, 1992, were not just chart hits. They were musical diaries, entries written by a woman who dared to live, to love, to fall, and to rise again. Each song reached into the deepest place in the listener's heart, the place where they saw themselves, not perfect, not whole, but undeniably real. Tanya's influence did not end with the decades she ruled radio. Generations after, Miranda Lambert, Casey Musgraves, spoke her name as inspiration. Lambert once admitted, "Without Tanya Tucker, I might never have dared to walk on stage with my sharp edges showing." Musgraves called her the woman who opened the door so we could be sexy, rebellious, fragile, and still, truly, ourselves. Then came 2019. After decades of turbulence, Tanya returned with While I'm Livin'. And when she won 2 Grammys, her first, nearly 50 years into her career, the audience erupted in tears. They weren't crying just for the music, but for justice. Finally delivered, even if late. The sight of Tanya on stage, platinum hair, eyes shining, Grammy in hand, was proof. Sometimes glory arrives late, but burns brighter than ever. The ultimate peak came on October 22nd, 2023, when the name Tanya Tucker was etched into the Country Music Hall of Fame. That night, Nashville fell silent for a heartbeat, before exploding in thunderous applause. Everyone in that room understood. They weren't only honoring a singer, they were witnessing immortality, the journey of a 13-year-old girl who sang Delta Dawn, the woman who stumbled, fell, but always rose again. And finally, the legend. Tanya Tucker's legacy is not measured in numbers, not in the dozens of top 10 hits, nor the prestigious awards. It lives in the truth that every time she sings, people feel seen. She turned country music from simple storytelling into a mirror, a place where the audience could see their pain, their love, their rebellion, and their strength to keep going. And perhaps that is her greatest influence. Tanya Tucker taught an entire generation that great art does not come from perfection. It comes from the courage to live truthfully to the very end. Present life. In her 60s, Tanya Tucker no longer has to prove anything. She has stood on the summit of fame, tasted the bitterness of scandal, loss, and loneliness. Now, when she steps on stage, she is no longer the child prodigy of 1972, nor the bad girl of country from the 1980s. She is a woman who has fallen, risen, and carried a voice roughened by pain, softened by gratitude. In 2019, While I'm Livin' brought more than Grammys. It opened a new chapter, where Tanya no longer chased charts. She simply sang what her heart demanded. Her song, Bring My Flowers Now, left thousands weeping, not for melody, but for its message. Cherish each other while you can. Don't wait until it's too late to bring the flowers. The lyrics were no longer just music. They were testimony. The confession of a life weathered by grief. Then came 2023. Sweet Western Sound, her collaboration with Brandi Carlile, rose like the echo of a survivor, singing her journey back to the younger generation. And on October 22nd, 2023, Tanya stepped into the Country Music Hall of Fame. She smiled, eyes glistening, as she spoke of the parents who were no longer there to see it. For one suspended breath, Nashville went silent. The girl once doubted she'd survive adulthood in the business, now stood immortal. Today, Tanya still tours, but on her own terms. No longer chained to the grueling cycles of the past, she chooses stages where she can truly connect with her audience. On social media, fans see a Tanya who is funny, approachable, sharing snapshots of family, of ordinary days. She once said, "I ran too fast in the first half of my life. In the second half, I just want to slow down, to see the simple things I once missed." Her health is no longer what it was. Age and the toll of wild years left aches and sudden pain. But Tanya faces it with calm acceptance. She knows each performance might be her last, and that very limit makes every moment more precious. Today, When Tanya Tucker sits in the place of honor at an award show or stands beneath the lights with platinum hair tousled, the world does not see just an entertainer. They see a witness to time, to turbulence, to an entire generation of country music. And her voice, though not as powerful as it once was, still reminds us, music is not about perfection. It is about truth. In her twilight years, Tanya Tucker carries a different kind of beauty, not the blazing fire of youth, but the warm glow of someone who has walked through storms and survived. And each time she sings, Nashville falls silent, listening not just to the song, but to a life written in music. The lights of Nashville must always go dark. The roar of applause will always fade into silence. But left upon the stage, through the drifting smoke, stands a woman who has endured it all, from blinding glory to the deepest valleys, from public scandal to losses no heart should bear. And what kept her alive was never perfection. It was a voice, husky, trembling, but achingly true. Tanya Tucker entered this world in 1958, a poor girl from Texas, and in 1972, she stunned America with Delta Dawn. For over half a century, she never stopped singing through joy, through heartbreak, through the very wounds life carved into her. Audiences did not love Tanya because she was a star. They loved her because she was the truth. And on October 22nd, 2023, when her name was etched into the sacred wall of the Country Music Hall of Fame, all of Nashville rose to its feet, not only to honor a career, but to salute a life that dared to burn itself completely for music. Now, with platinum hair falling gently across her shoulders, Tanya no longer needs to seek immortality. She already has it. In the songs still playing in kitchen radios, in the long rides down empty highways, in the hearts of those who once found comfort in that raspy voice. One day, when Nashville's stage is only memory, that voice will remain, not as fleeting applause, but as a steady flame, burning forever in the hearts of those who love country music. If Tanya Tucker's voice and her story have touched your heart, leave a like, hit subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Because that is how legacies like Tanya's live on, ensuring her voice will never fade.